What up, what up, what up? We are live from the SEC Focus podcast studio back. It's been a while since we've been on here. A lot has happened, man. A lot has happened. But it's Selection Sunday, March Madness, national holiday, as our boy Jeremy pointed out to me this morning on the SEC Focus podcast page. So first thing I want to do, let's do a little recap. So before the season started, did a little SEC basketball preview of where I thought everybody would kind of shake out over the course of the season. And I got to tell you, I did not do so hot in some areas. So just to recap, I'm not going to read the whole recap I did, but the way this is how I saw it happening. Before the season started, I had Arkansas winning the SEC. That did not turn out very well. I had Kentucky finishing second. I had Alabama finishing third. They really proved me wrong. Tennessee finishing fourth. Yeah, pretty close there. Auburn finishing fifth. Not too far off there. Mississippi State. That was my dark horse, my surprise pick that I thought really could go somewhere. Did they finish sixth? No, they did not, but it does look like they'll be a tournament team. So I think Chris Jans has done a really good job. Thought he had a chance to with some of the talent that he brought in. I think that's worked out well. Big miss here. I had Florida finishing seventh. Really thought that Golden could get in there, be a bubble team in his first year. Had a lot of talent there. Didn't work out. Well, we'll see what happens next year with Mr. Golden. Texas A&M, I had them finishing eighth. I did say that I thought they would make the tournament because Buzz Williams has never been anywhere in his fourth year and not made the tournament in that year, and it obviously looks like they will make the tournament this year. But I did have them finishing eighth, and they finished second in the regular season with a chance to win the SEC tournament championship today against Alabama. Big, huge miss here. I had LSU finishing ninth. I didn't think that they would really make the tournament, didn't really think that they would be that dangerous, but obviously with them only finishing with 2 SEC wins this year, he took over an absolute dumpster fire, Matt McMahon. However, I think that they started off with a really good record, front-loaded that schedule, picked up a win against Arkansas, but their only 2 wins were against Arkansas and Vanderbilt, which was late. So I think that something to build on there for them, but just a terrible season. Ole Miss had them finishing 10th, did not have them getting into the tournament, didn't have them winning a whole lot of games, did not see it going as poorly as it did. I thought they dealt with a lot of injuries last year. However, this year, Kermit Davis obviously loses his job, and he's on to different things. That Ole Miss team did play more inspired basketball after Kermit Davis was let go, but just not enough gump there. This was my biggest miss right here. Missouri had them finishing 11th in the SEC. So it just really goes to show you that we're all guessing here. Dennis Gates, what a fantastic job that he did. Just what he's able to do with that team and get them believing from the jump, winning tons of big games. Obviously, they fall short against Alabama yesterday. I think a lot of teams are going to fall short to Alabama. That team's got a real shot at a national championship, despite all of the distractions off the court. Vanderbilt, I had them finishing 12th in the SEC, and they actually ended up finishing 6th in the regular season, went on an incredible run towards the end of the season, started off really rocky for them, finishing, they started out 10-12 going into SEC play, losing a bunch of games, but the way that they finished the season, winning, I think it was 9 of their last 10, maybe 10 of their last 11, really, beating Kentucky twice in a week. I think that Jerry Stackhouse got the extension and a raise before the season started. People were calling for his head. Vanderbilt fans were calling for his head. They were writing letters to the AD saying this is unacceptable. He was 16-45 in the SEC, and then just goes on an incredible run. Has them right now, it looks like by all projections, has them as a first 4 out, so it doesn't look like they're going to be a tournament team. Obviously, I think that if they do not make the tournament, they'll be number 1 seed in the NIT. Again, the NIT last year. And, we'll see where Vanderbilt goes from here. I thought that especially after they lost Defensive Player of the Year, Liam Robbins, they did a fantastic job at rebounding and playing well. So Georgia, I had them finishing 13th. They kind of finished about where I said they would. I thought that, Mike White coming in had a long way to go, still has a long way to go. He has a tough job ahead of him making Georgia basketball relevant. I thought they played some inspired basketball, had some tough games, but I think there's a long way to go there. And I had South Carolina finishing 14th in the SEC. They didn't, to their credit. They finished 12th. So the big misses that I had, first of all, I had Arkansas finishing first in the regular season, and that obviously did not turn out well at all. And I had Florida 7th. I think I pretty missed on that one pretty well. Missed on Vanderbilt, obviously a great run. But talking about the SEC going into the tournament, I said before the season I thought they would have 7 teams make the dance. It looks like they will have 8, according to most bracketologist experts, if you will. Maybe 9 if somehow Vanderbilt does get in there. I think a couple things working against Vanderbilt, obviously, are the quad 3 and 4 losses. They have 3 of those. The net, the KenPom, all of the metrics or the predictive metrics have them, sitting around the 80 mark. I don't think they can overcome that. Now, some would argue that the net's broken, the KenPom's broken, but these are the same metrics that we use every year. So they can be broken, but that is part of the strategy, part of the selection criteria. So it is what it is. My player of the year, I really think that if we're getting into Arkansas, I had them finishing first. Obviously, they dealt with some injuries, but can Arkansas create some of that magic that they've had the last couple years and go on another run? I think that the talent is there. I think Musselman has shown that he can do that. Obviously, just losing a close game in the SEC tournament. However, and that was a really bad look with their assistant coach throwing a fan's phone down. I understand you don't want phones in your face. You just lost a tough game, but you can't do that. You cannot do that at all. Before the season started, coach of the year, obviously, I had Musselman. And the co-coach of the year, as the SEC, they came out with their awards about a week ago. Just to recap some of that, they gave co-coach of the year to Buzz Williams and Jerry Stackhouse. Now, my problem with the co-coach of the year as selected by the coaches is that you got to look at this in totality. To me, if you look at the totality of the season, granted, he did the way that he handled the Brandon Miller and the off the court stuff was definitely the subject of some critique, rightfully so. But Nate Oates, in my opinion, was coach of the year. Buzz Williams, that's fine if you want to give him coach of the year, but you have to count the games at the first part of the season just as much as you count the games in the last part of the season, right? So what Buzz and Jerry Stackhouse both did was start the season really, really, really poorly going into SEC play. Now, both went on some runs late in the year. Buzz Williams started his run a little bit earlier in SEC play. But I think that if you're going to give the coach of the year to anybody, in my opinion, in the SEC, it should have been Dennis Gates. What he was able to do with that Missouri team was remarkable. Coming in, I think that people thought they had some talent and they could score. And that's still kind of what they think because the defense has been a little lackluster. But for that team to go in losing in the semifinals to Alabama in the SEC tournament, their tournament team had some huge wins this year. So I think that Dennis Gates was probably deserving. Player of the year, Brandon Miller. I don't think that anybody's going to argue that. Now, if you wanted to bring up off-court stuff and the patting him down in the pregame even after all that happened, I mean, that's fine. But the guy is SEC basketball player of the year, 100%. Freshman of the year, Brandon Miller. Again, I mean, there's really no other option there for freshman of the year. Co-sixth man of the year, that goes to Javon Quinterly from Alabama. Obviously, that guy coming back off of the ACL injury and being as effective as he was in a lot of games this year, very deserving there. And Antonio Reeves from Kentucky, he's co-sixth man of the year. Defensive player of the year, Liam Robbins. I don't think anybody has a lot of objection to that. Obviously, I already mentioned it when Vanderbilt lost him several games ago to the year. It was a huge blow, and you wondered if Vanderbilt would fall back into the losing ways, and they didn't. To their credit, Jerry Stackhouse pushed all the right buttons, and I'm not saying that he's not deserving for some recognition for Coach of the Year, but in my opinion, Dennis Gates was more deserving of Coach of the Year than either Buzz Williams or Jerry Stackhouse. All SEC, the first team, I don't think there was a lot of surprises here. Brandon Miller, Colin Castleton, I think that he was great, but Florida just ever really was able to catch on and win a bunch of games in succession. Oscar Tshiebwe, all SEC first team. Nobody was going to scoff at that. Tolu Smith from Mississippi State, Kobe Brown from Missouri. What an absolute star he has been for Missouri this year. He also gets the SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year. So just an all-around great player, great student. Santiago Vescovi, he's on the All SEC first team. I thought that he dealt with some injuries this year, obviously with some injuries to Zakai Ziegler this year. Really, Tennessee was already kind of in a skid, and then you lose Ziegler. Just felt like the air goes out of the room there if you're Tennessee. Wade Taylor for Texas A&M also on that first team, and Liam Robbins, obviously all SEC first team as well. So looking at the bracketology, I think that if you're looking around, 8 SEC teams, like I mentioned, are in the tournament, and Alabama obviously is a 1 seed. I don't think there's any surprise there. And if you look at that, has them playing in the Louisville bracket, starting things off in Birmingham, just to kind of go over what they would have going. So they actually have an interesting, if they get past the 16 seed matchup, their 8-9 matchup right now, according to ESPN, would be Florida Atlantic, Maryland. Now that's a tough 8-9 matchup there. So I think you got to be on the lookout there. And then you have TCU, VCU, in that same bracket. Missouri is also in that bracket on the 7-10 line. Texas is in that bracket on the 2-15 line. So that's an interesting bracket there. I think that Alabama, that second game, can they win? Of course they can. But that second game is something to absolutely look out for. Going down to the Vegas bracket, Houston would be the 1 seed there. But just speaking SEC teams, you have A&M in that bracket as a 5 seed. I think they're going to be a tough out for anybody that they face. You have Kentucky's also in that bracket. They would be starting off in Sacramento with Boise State. I know that this has been an underwhelming season for Kentucky. I think that a lot of people, especially Kentucky fans, some of them have even been calling for Cal's job. I think that's a little bit premature, but you have to win at Kentucky. Being a 7 seed, kind of limping your way into the tournament, it's not going to do. Losing to Vanderbilt in the SEC tournament, I don't care how good of a run Stackhouse has been on, Big Blue Nation is never going to let that slide. So they're on the 7-10 line right now, again, according to ESPN and Joe Lunardi over there. I think that's it on that. So on the New York bracket, Purdue would be the overall number 1 seed in that. This is a really deep bracket, in my opinion. Might be the toughest one. Again, this is not final. We'll find out this evening. But on the 8-9 line for Purdue, you have Memphis and West Virginia. So Purdue on that second game, they're really going to be having their hands full. I think that last year you saw that Memphis pushed Gonzaga. I think they could do the same thing to Purdue. But just sticking with SEC teams, that's where Tennessee is on the 4-13. Their first round matchup would be Kent State, and the 5-12. If both of those teams advance, would be Iowa State, Charleston. So could definitely be an interesting second round matchup there. Sticking also with SEC teams there, you have Auburn on the 7-10 line, on the 10 line there. Trending down, I think Auburn has really, what I said about them in the preseason is the same thing I said about Tennessee. I wondered where their scoring would come from, and I think that that's came to fruition. I don't think that they either team has a guy that you can just say, hey, go get me a bucket in crunch time and count on them game in and game out. Both teams are phenomenal defensively, and defense is a premium in the tournament, especially in March Madness. However, what's more at a premium is saying, hey, I need a bucket right here. Go get me some points. And I think both teams kind of struggle with that. So Auburn, they have them on that 7-10 line facing Northwestern in the first round. And then should they advance, Marquette is on the 2-15 with Colgate on the 15 seed. Going up to the Kansas City, you have Kansas as that overall number 1 seed. And this is interesting too. Arkansas on the 8-9. Their first round predicted matchup is Illinois. So this one, actually, if Arkansas can put it together, and I know we've been saying this all year and they just haven't done it, but Arkansas the last couple years, we're talking about a team that's made multiple Elite Eights in a row. Can they do it again? And what I think is interesting about this tournament right now is that I don't think that there is one dominant team. There's not one seed. There's not a 2 seed that I think cannot be gotten by a lower seed. I'm not talking about the 1-16 matchups. I'm talking about those second rounds when they go to those 8-9s. I mean, those are really some interesting matchups, because right now, if you look at Kansas, say they win and then Arkansas wins, Arkansas-Kansas, is anybody just going to tell me that that's going to be a blowout off the top because of the names? I don't think so. Obviously, you have the Bill Self stuff. They say that he will be back. That's a distraction. And we've seen Kansas get beat. We saw Tennessee beat Kansas. We saw Kansas just get blown out in the Big 12 championship game by Texas. So I think that'll be an interesting one to look for there. And let's see here. Some other interesting. The Kansas one, Arizona is the 2 seed in that one. I think there's only SEC team in that bracket. In the Kansas City bracket is Arkansas. So 8 teams is what they have projected to make. Where was Mississippi State? They were in the play-ins. Yes, Mississippi State was going to be in the play-in game against Pittsburgh on the 11 seed line. So right now in the 68 team bracket, the Joe Lunardi ESPN has 8 SEC teams in. All signs point to Vanderbilt getting left out, just based on the nets, based on the metrics, based on some losses. I think had they beat Texas A&M, the conversation would have been different. Kind of moving the goalpost is what Vanderbilt fans would say, but early season losses count just as much as late season wins. I think you really got to look at the totality of that, and it looks like Vanderbilt is going to be on the outside looking in. Daniel Ball says Kentucky. Look, DB, we were just talking Kentucky because I think that everybody wants to talk Kentucky. Big Blue Nation showed up and showed out. I mentioned this on Facebook that I thought that the SEC and the city of Nashville were going to be disappointed that you didn't have Kentucky, still in the basketball tournament. Obviously, we know Nashville is booming and there's people everywhere. But once Nashville lost Kentucky, they lost a whole lot of fans. And then I even have a guy come back and say, well, the tickets are already sold. That's true. It's not so much the tickets sold that I think the SEC or Nashville cares about. It's that economic impact all the way around. And you had your largest fan bases, Kentucky, Tennessee had a bunch of fans there. Arkansas always brings a bunch of fans. Alabama had some too. So Alabama's still in it, but the three larger fan bases that do travel for the basketball all sent home early. So we'll see what the crowd looks like today as Alabama takes on Texas A&M. And I think that for a lot of people, they're going to just assume that Alabama's going to win this running away, and they might. But I think that Texas A&M has proven over the course of the last 2 months that they are game to play anybody. They're really tough-minded. They're really, really, really well coached. So I think that they might be in for a dogfight. I do think Alabama wins because I think that when, again, I mentioned that buckets are at a premium, and when you have a guy like Brandon Miller on your team that you can give the ball to, and you don't even have to draw up a play. You just say, here's the ball, get the hell out of the way, and he can go get you a bucket. We've seen him do that time and time and time and time again, whether it's driving to the lane, drawing a foul, getting to the line, whether it's hitting a big three. He can do all of that. The guy's a certified bucket, and he will be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. So Alabama fans, enjoy it now because my man is going to be in the NBA next year. So that's what we have going on. The team that I think that it's easy to say who can make the deepest run as far as an SEC basketball team. To me, that answer is pretty easy. I'm going to keep it simple, stupid. I'm going to give everybody some chalk answer. It's Alabama. Again, for all the reasons that I just said. They're deep. They're talented. They can score. They can defend. They have the best player in the tournament, in my opinion. Was A&M the same team that Memphis played? I don't think so. Something has clicked with them. That comes in from DB. I think you're right. I think that A&M at the time that Memphis played them, which was a really close game, I think that they were really on a losing streak. They hadn't found what their identity was. I think that Buzz Williams really puts a premium on being better at the end of the year. And really good coach. I think that if they played again, I wouldn't say that Memphis wouldn't win, though, DB. I think both teams are really tough. And if you were to give me a guy like Kendrick, give me that guy every time because he's getting me buckets. You got a 27-year-old DeAndre Williams. Obviously, we saw them play really well yesterday and, win by 40. And I think Memphis has a shot today to beat Houston, but I don't think that changes anything for Houston on the one line. It could help Memphis a little bit. What I really don't understand about all of these conference tournaments, it seems to me like they do not put a premium on today's games. They have already made up their mind on seeding going into today's games. So I don't think that these games, other than for your pride, if you're Memphis, you don't want to lose 3 times to Houston. If you're Alabama, you want to be the SEC champions. However, I think seeding is pretty much done. We're going to see Alabama on the 1 line. We're going to see Tennessee on that 4 line. And everybody else, Auburn, the 10 line, Arkansas, that 8-9 line. Mississippi State looks like they're going to be in that play-in on the 11 line. So I think that's kind of where we are as far as March Madness goes. Obviously, this is a huge time of year for everybody. Brackets will be getting filled out. We are going to be having I think maybe Nate Gladwell, if you're listening, hopefully we're putting something together in the SEC Focus page where we'll have an ESPN Tournament Challenge. Nikki Mays always putting together some good giveaways. So perhaps we could have some tumblers or some shirts or something. She loves giving away good prizes. So the winner will definitely be getting something. So transitioning a little bit, we're off of the SEC basketball, and just to get into a little bit of SEC baseball, because I think that it's huge, especially this time of year, especially going into this next week as we see SEC conference play starting. We've seen a lot of teams play some tough games. We've seen some teams kind of front load with what they thought were going to be some easy wins. But I'm going to start it off with this. So the SEC baseball, I did the same thing for basketball. We just heard my misses on that. I got some of them right and a lot of them wrong. And I might be doing the same thing. But I did an order of finish for the SEC in the West and in the East. My SEC West, I'm going to start with that. No surprise for who I think is going to finish first. I think it's LSU, probably going to finish number one overall, which I hope they do, because that did not work out well for Tennessee. However, let's see here. I got LSU, Arkansas finishing second. I got Ole Miss finishing third in the West, A&M fourth, Mississippi State fifth, Auburn sixth, and Alabama seventh. Now, I know Alabama fans are probably going to be listening. You don't even watch baseball, so don't get upset by this. You're a football school. Stick with that. Now you're basketball. You got Brandon Miller. Enjoy all that, but leave the basketball to the rest of us. I mean, the baseball to the rest of us, because Alabama, I think that they front-loaded that schedule, and I don't think that we saw this weekend when they played Columbia, which, by the way, if you are not an avid follower of college baseball and you're looking at it saying, well, Columbia, how did they lose to them? Columbia was a regional team, played in the regional championship last year, so it's not like Columbia is a bad team. Yes, they're a bunch of really smart kids, and they beat Alabama 2 out of 3. One time they smoked them pretty good, put up 15 runs on them. So I'm not to just pile on to Alabama. Columbia is a good baseball team. So that, to recap, SEC West, I have it going LSU, Arkansas, Ole Miss, A&M, Mississippi State, Auburn, Alabama. For the East, people are going to say this is biased. You're a Tennessee fan. I absolutely am. And I have Tennessee finishing first in the SEC East. So I actually have Florida finishing second. I think that, they're figuring some things out right now. They have to shore up the bullpen. They got some real problems there, but their offense is unbelievable. I think that, with Cags, Langford obviously being out for a little while, we won't talk about his injury because it makes me cringe. However, I think that team is loaded with talent, and I have them finishing second. I have South Carolina finishing third in the SEC East. I think their pitching staff is really, really good. Their lineup is really good. They've been scoring a bunch of runs. So I think they're going to be somebody to be contended with. Vanderbilt, I have them finishing fourth. And I did all these predictions before the season started. And what I've noticed about Vanderbilt is the opposite of what I said about Florida and their bullpen. I think that Vanderbilt, they're arm tight, as my guy Chris likes to say sometimes, but they just can't score runs. And eventually that catches up to you, because you're going to have nights where your pitching staff is off. And I think that Vanderbilt, once you get into SEC play, like they open with Ole Miss, right? Ole Miss scores a lot of runs. You're going to give up runs in the SEC, and you have to be able to score some runs. And so far, they are the only team through the first 3 weeks with under 100 runs scored. So I think that could come back to get them eventually. So Georgia, I actually have them finishing fifth in the East, and then I have Kentucky and Missouri. Again, I did these before the season even started, so I think if I could go back and change anything, I probably would move Missouri up to that line. But sticking with it, I'm going to go with it. So to recap, in the East, I have Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Georgia, Kentucky, Missouri. So I want to talk about a little bit of openers. And the one that intrigues me the most, probably going into the weekend, Ole Miss opening up with Vanderbilt. We're going to see a little bit of strength on strength. I think that you're going to see offense versus defense. Ole Miss definitely lost a lot from last year, the championship team. And I actually thought going into the season that was too much. Did not have them ranked in my preseason top 25. They have played really well, even really well against really good competition. They got a lot of young talent. They got to figure some things out. Right now, they have Hunter Elliott out for just a few more weeks. I think that once he comes back, you kind of shore up your weekend rotation. Your pitching staff is desperately going to need him. But with Vanderbilt, like I said, arm tight, ERA is pretty good. I think they figured some things out with their rotation. They have to figure things out with their lineup. Right now, Enrique Bradfield Jr., obviously we know that he's an electric talent. We know that that guy's been a great leadoff hitter for Vanderbilt, but right now hitting, I think, right around 200, a little below. You cannot have that out of your leadoff hitter. But the whole lineup in general is, I mean, they're as a team, they're batting less than 250, just not going to work in the SEC play. Alabama, things do not get easier for them. Losing 2 out of 3 to Columbia, and then they're opening at Florida. I think that Florida, even with Langford being out, has enough to beat them, maybe even sweep them. So I think that's going to show us a lot about Alabama. Are they for real? Is Florida for real? They've been putting up a lot of runs. They've lost a couple of games too, though. So we're going to see a little bit more about both teams. Mississippi State. This is a team, obviously, that missed the tournament last year, has a lot of talent that's coming in here. Is Lamona's going to be able to rebuild, get back to the tournament, get back to hosting regionals, get super regionals? We don't know. They're opening at Kentucky, a Kentucky team that not a lot of talk has been about. They do have some veterans in their lineup. The pitching staff has been decent. So we'll find out a little bit about both of those teams as well. I think the Mississippi State has a lot to prove. Their fan base obviously is starving, to get back to where they feel like they rightfully belong, being, at Duty Noble. Obviously, that's Taj Mahal, but opening on the road. South Carolina at Georgia. Now, this one, even though I have Georgia, picked towards the bottom of the East, I think they've been a surprise team so far. They've had had a good series win. I think that South Carolina, we were on a couple of spaces earlier this year, Jim, DB, and I, on the In Off the Bench podcast, where we were told that South Carolina's pitching staff by season's end would be the best pitching staff in the SEC. So there's some belief there from South Carolina. I don't have that same belief. I think that Tennessee is the best pitching staff, not only in the SEC. I think they're the best pitching staff in the country, and I think there's nothing I've seen so far that makes me think otherwise. I think that like even this weekend, Dollander goes out Friday. He gets 11 strikeouts. Chase Burns comes in. He gets 12 strikeouts yesterday. Drew Beam comes in the doubleheader yesterday. He gets 9 strikeouts. They have a guy that is their midweek pitcher that could start on 90% of anybody else's Friday night roster, Saturday night maybe. He's a weekend starter, and the bullpen's been really good. So speaking of Tennessee, they open at Missouri. I think Missouri had a good showing to start the season. Do I think that is sustainable? It's going to be tough. Obviously, you have a really good shot with Tennessee coming into town. It's where Tony Vitello played. It's where he started his coaching career. So you got a little bit there. But I think maybe Tennessee is going to be a little too much. LSU opening at Texas A&M. Jim and I, we talked about this when the season started. I really thought, both of us thought, that A&M would take a step back. I still do believe that, and I think that LSU is definitely the more talented team, the better team. But you're going into Texas A&M. It's going to be tough. I mean, that's not going to be a gimme game. That's a gritty team. Schloss is going to be really on his guys. He's going to be pushing them, and it's not a game I think you can go into if you're LSU. Maybe we saw that against Iowa, going in not laser focused, and if you do that, you could go into A&M and lose 2 out of 3. Last series of note in the SEC, Auburn opens at Arkansas. So at Baum-Walker, Arkansas has really dealt with some pitching, some injuries. Obviously, they lost some guys too from last year, but they've kept winning. They had a game. Obviously, they've lost a couple, but that so far so good, right? And we haven't seen that the arms that they've lost, and it's been tough 2 years in a row for Arkansas with losing arms. But obviously this year, just recently, Brady Tigert going out, Prince of the In Off the Bench podcast, one of them, obviously. But I think he'll be back this year. He's going to be reevaluated soon. So we'll see. But I think Auburn has a really good shot there. And nobody really talks about Auburn, and all they keep doing is just making Omaha, right? So a team that just flies under the radar, maybe they get 15, 16 wins in the season in the SEC, and then they end up in Omaha somehow. It's wild to me. I had a question asked before we came on the podcast about what teams I thought would host regionals, super regionals, and get to Omaha. So I looked up, and a guy that we follow, I think everybody should follow, Ben Upton. He put out the round of the tournament, basically. And, I think we got nobody's really going to be surprised. The Baton Rouge, LSU hosting in theirs. You have Central Florida, Louisiana, and Jackson State. But just sticking with SEC, they have A&M would be playing in the Fort Worth with TCU hosting. we got to figure out if TCU is actually a host team. They started out the season like gangbusters. They've had some injuries as well, but they've kind of fallen off a little bit. So I look to see them rebound. Charlottesville, Virginia, that's a pretty good team. They have Georgia going there as the 2 seed. And then Nashville, Vanderbilt. So what's a 4 SEC teams so far. This is the regional round. Let's see. Arkansas as a host. Florida as a host. Auburn would be going to Winston-Salem with Rake Forest. I think that team is unbelievable. They're really fun to watch, hitting all those home runs. Oxford, Ole Miss hosting with La Tech as a 3 seed in there. I really hope that happens. I mean, I think we all saw the earlier, I think it was just a couple weeks ago when La Tech had won, the Tuesday night game, and then the Wednesday night game, La Tech goes out in the top of the 7th. They take the lead. The game is ended by rain. And the NCAA rule is you revert back to the inning prior, the last completed inning, which gave Ole Miss the win. So La Tech could have more than likely come out of there with a 2-game midweek sweep. Instead, they come out 1-1. And La Tech coach had a lot to say about that. So I really hope that actually does happen. This one's a little bit surprising. Raleigh, they have NC State as the host with South Carolina going there. Tennessee hosting, and this could be a really fun, if this does shake out, Miami as the 2 seed in the Knoxville regional. That would be a ton of fun to watch. Both of those teams talk a lot. Both teams are really talented, fiery coaches. I think it'd be great to see. Let's see. As far as SEC teams go, I think the last one would be Alabama as the 2 seed in the Iowa City regional. I think we saw Iowa so far this weekend, though, they've lost 2 straight to Texas Tech, but they did have a big win over LSU, and I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. So in the conference, so we'll see, and I think that Alabama has some work to do too to stay on that 2 line. So then the question was then asked on who I think is going to make it to Omaha out of the SEC. I think LSU is going to make it to Omaha. That could be what it looks to be one of the most talented teams in the country, probably the most talented on paper. It's baseball, though. Things do happen. Can a team go number 1 to number 1 all the way through? We know and we believe in on the In Off the Bench podcast in the number one seed curse. We just saw it last year with Tennessee. We haven't seen a number 1 seed go into the tournament and win, I think, since 1999. So there's a lot to be said about that. So, but as far as that goes, I think that I would go LSU. I think Arkansas makes it to Omaha. They're always there, never won. I want to point that out to you Arkansas fans that are getting on there and calling Tony Vitello a choke job. And I think Tennessee is going to make it to Omaha, back to Omaha. I think what we've seen this year has been good for Tennessee. They're not blowing through teams like they were. They've won some games, by 20 runs or something. But I think that what you're going to see, they're going to see them lose some games. They're not going to win 57 games again, but you do have an absolute studs in your pitching rotation, and that goes not just your weekend rotation, your midweek, your bullpen. They have just arm after arm after arm after arm. And I think they're figuring things out with the lineup, right? I think that one of the things coming in, they didn't have Maui to start the season. First couple games he struggled. He now is finding himself, hit a couple home runs over the weekend on his birthday nonetheless. Griffin Merritt, that guy was a American Conference Player of the Year. He comes over to Tennessee. He absolutely killed it this weekend. I think he had 3 home runs on the weekend. I think he's going to be a catalyst to what they do. It's a name you don't hear. You hear a lot about Maui. Zane Denton, another one, hit for the cycle this weekend. So that's a name to be looking out for. And then obviously, Tony Vitello, he's very, he's polarizing. So they root against him, and that's fine. That's fine. You can think what you want to about Tony, but I think they're going to be back in Omaha this year. That's the 3 that I have making it. The reason that I don't, and I know Chris or whoever, Vanderbilt fans are going to see this and be like, well, of course we're going to be in Omaha. I need to see more consistent offense. I think that they have some arms to be there. If I had to pick a 4th team out of the SEC, I think it's going to be Florida, just because I think that their offense is good enough and their pitching staff. The one thing, and I mentioned this already, their bullpen, they have to get better in the bullpen. Their bullpen right now is giving up the booty. I mean, their starters will go in there and they'll be just throwing lights out. We got a comment here, and I guarantee you this has got to be from Chloe, because it says, just hopping on to give you my hot take. The last time Kentucky lost to Vanderbilt in the SEC tournament, we won it all, so we're doing it again this year. Nah, jokes aside, this team is inconsistent. Yeah, that's true. I think that isn't that really the nature of the beast this year, just in the SEC basketball in general, because I think that's the way that is definitely everybody's kind of inconsistent. We've seen Alabama, have some inconsistent games. But back on baseball, I can't let Chloe get me distracted. She don't want to talk baseball because Kentucky's not very good at baseball. However, like I said, so that's my 4 that I think are going to make it in: LSU, Arkansas, Florida, and Tennessee. I need to see more from Alabama. I think South Carolina could be a team to get there. How many teams can we get to Omaha? Can it be 4? Can it be 5? We'll see. I think that more than likely I'm probably sitting here talking about this in June, and we're probably saying that there was 2 SEC teams that made it in, maybe even 3. Maybe it won't be 4. But I think that the SEC, we talk about it in football, but if you really think about it in baseball, the SEC is it's even deeper. It's even deeper than football, because I think a lot of what the pundits would say about football is we have a couple of good teams and then we have some mediocre teams. And baseball is really not like that. Every single team can go out on any given night and beat one of the best teams in the conference. And I think that it's probably the most competitive conference. I think the ACC would have a say in that. They're pretty deep in baseball as well. But like I said, the SEC it's just so deep. So again, to recap what we went over, basketball, it's Selection Sunday. The SEC, it looks like they're going to get 8 teams in. I think the SEC is going to get 4 teams into Omaha. And I also wanted to bring up the daylight savings time. It started or ended or whatever it did today. Abolish the daylight savings time thing. I want it to always get dark at 8 o'clock. I don't want it to be dark at 5. So get rid of that. That's my hot take of the day. People are talking about legislation going in. It's got to be a standard. It's got to be a standard. Get rid of daylight savings time. Farmers, they don't need it anyway. We want daylight as long as we can have it. So enjoy your Selection Sunday. Enjoy your sunset at 7:30 or whatever time it is going to be where you are. I'm going to enjoy mine. Happy Sunday. Happy Selection Sunday. Go Vols.